September. Wow, it's time for MPP Bobbi Anne Brady show, monthly show. First of all, I'm going to tell you a story today,
Oh,
and I
good.
want you to listen to me. You always do,
Perfect.
but this is so. I just spent, as you can see, I haven't shaven. I spent a week in Algonquin with my son. That park
Nice.
it's a jewel. You know what I
It
mean?
is.
So
Yep.
green, so beautiful. 5 interior lakes, just hung out. Bear scat here, moose scat there. I love it. I love it. It's what we do every year, and it's just so much fun. And before I went in, I was reading lots on the Greenbelt. Now, I
Mm,
know Algonquin's not in that state, but it
yeah.
really reminded me of the importance being up there and just being in that freedom of green space, even, in that environment, but for the agricultural component that we have in Southern Ontario, how important the Greenbelt is.
Mhm.
And I kind of came out of the woods a little pissed off because stop destroying this. We need this land.
Mhm.
I'm going to open the floor. Here's the Greenbelt. Tell me what you think, because it bothered me. It seriously bothered me. Like, when you get that opportunity and you enjoy it so much, don't take that away.
No, and I am fearful. I mean, I campaigned on this, Dave, the preservation of productive land, productive farmland. And it's funny how people's view of that protection changes when government, makes it lucrative for them. And absolutely, we have to protect these green spaces. We have to protect them for a number of reasons: environmental, food production. People tell me, and I've said this before, people tell me that I'm dramatic when I say that we got to make sure we preserve as much farmland as possible. But when we continue to talk about, and it all ties back to the green belt, we have to develop the green belt because we have this housing crisis. In case you haven't heard, of course I'm being facetious, but um, when we continue to need housing because we continue to bring more people to Ontario, to Canada, um, yes, the idea of preserving enough farmland to feed those people is extremely important, because if we can't afford to feed them here, if we can't produce enough food here to feed those folks, then we have to import food. And right now, the biggest importing of food comes, our food comes from the US. What we don't produce here in Canada comes from the US. And guess what? They're doing the exact same thing in the United States as they are here in Canada. They're paving over absolutely everything. And it's concerning. I mean, I don't know, like in 50 years, I'm afraid we're going to be eating astronaut food. And I know it sounds dramatic, but it really scares me when I see so much development going on everywhere. And people are very frustrated by it because they say, why would we bring people to a province that has a healthcare crisis, that has an education crisis? We have all these crises, and yet we're saying, oh, let's build more houses to bring them in. It makes no sense. And then what really ticks people off in this neck of the woods, I've heard this from constituents over the past few weeks. They say, what, Bobbi Anne, I've been paying taxes here forever and ever. And, I would have liked A, B, and C in my community, but we've been told no. But they said, as soon as we bring a whole bunch of outsiders in, that's when we will get those things that we've been asking for so long. And I get it. I get if you don't have the tax base, you can't afford certain things. But do those people who move into our area actually pay for themselves? I asked that question of a town councilor or county councilor recently. I said, do you honestly believe that these folks pay for themselves? And the answer was no. Of course not, because we're asking folks to put up houses everywhere, and yet municipalities. I was at AMO last week, Association of Municipalities of Ontario in London. I couldn't find one municipality that wasn't complaining about not having the necessary water and sewer capacity to actually put these to meet these housing targets that the province has asked them to meet. And yes, the province announced $1.2 billion, but how does that get divvied up? And it's a drop in the bucket when you're looking at water and sewer capacity. I don't get it. I simply don't get it. And with the cost of everything, I'm afraid in 10 years, we're going to have, close to 1 million homes sitting empty because people are going to have fled to some other place where they can actually afford to have a mortgage, to have a house, and to put food on the table. And I don't see affordable housing. Um, I just see houses being put up that are $800,000-900,000, and the average person simply can't afford. So I don't know what's going on, but it has me very scared.
The original concept of the Greenbelt plan back in '06, I mean, it the whole why it was done was one of the main reasons was to protect agricultural land.
That's right.
How can a government change that? Like that, I thought that was like solid. I thought that was instilled, never to be touched. How do
Mm-hmm.
you change that? What did he do to make that changeable?
Yeah, I don't really know. There was a whole bunch of the amount of kind of planning legislation that was changed within, say, the 18, 19 months is absolutely astounding. I don't think that's ever been done in history. And a lot of those changes allowed, a lot of that legislative change allowed for what we've seen happen with the green belt. And how do you rein that back in? Sure, there's investigations, but the damage is done. um, you know, Parts of that green belt are going to be developed.
And once you start, how do you stop it? Like this is the other part. Like it's, oh, we just need a little bit right now, and then in 5 years, oh, we need a little bit more. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a constant erosion. Do you not?
That's
I'm
right.
asking because that's
Yeah,
my feeling.
yeah,
What do you
absolutely.
think?
Because we see that that's happened. So um, it's my understanding that the majority of development that has occurred over the past few years is actually on the most prime agricultural land, because that development is happening now outside of kind of the urban areas
Oh,
of small towns, and that ends up being the most productive land. And we know what happens. So they put in, they change the zoning for this particular chunk, and then they go, oh, this is a great place to add more houses. We've seen it in neighboring communities, and it just keeps expanding, expanding, expanding. And what people don't realize is that, you know they think that it's creating a bigger tax base, but at the end of the day, there's only one taxpayer, and it's you and I. And it doesn't matter whether we're paying municipal taxes, provincial taxes, or federal taxes. It's you and I who are paying that. So it doesn't matter if it's a municipal expense, provincial, federal. You and I pay it. And so these developers come in and they slam up these houses, and then we have the school board coming to me saying, hey, Bobbi Anne, we need a new school here. We need a new school here. We need to refurbish this one. Right. We pay for that.
yeah.
Right. It's not like it's not like the developer pays that. It's not like, the people moving in provide us enough money to actually pay for those things, fire departments, healthcare services. We talk about the development at Nanticoke. Again,
That's what I
there's
was going to bring
another
up.
place. Like,
Yeah.
I think Nanticoke could potentially be as large as the Greenbelt if that moves ahead, because nobody should live in an industrial park. I've said that over and over for a number of reasons, but also, say 40,000 people were living in the Nanticoke Industrial Park. Where are we going to get doctors for these folks? We can't attract doctors right now. Um, it's
Is
just mind-boggling.
is it? I mean, isn't Townsend the example already?
Yeah, yeah. Townsend, yeah,
It didn't
was
meet its
supposed.
potential. It's a beautiful community. Don't get me wrong,
It is beautiful.
but
Yeah,
what the heck? We look at what went through there, and it just didn't develop the way they thought it would.
we
And
built it and they didn't come.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the truth of that matter.
So, there's a lot going on here now with the Greenbelt, and AMO. It was fascinating to to hear Doug Ford and his cabinet ministers dance around the questions on the Greenbelt. And it's funny, but not funny, when a counselor says to me, "Hey, Bobbi Anne, like, are there actually courses in how to avoid the real question?" Of course there is. There's all sorts of media training on how to avoid the question. And normally I'd be the person who would say, yeah, we got to be positive. We got to go on the upbeat here. And that's what the premier did at AMO when it came to his speech to all the delegates. But it's not lost on folks. So you're speaking to a whole room of politicos, and you're trying to change the channel on the green belt. Well, it kind of failed for the guy, and for Steve Clark, the minister as well, who this week is really under the microscope. The integrity commissioner has come out with a big report on Minister Clark and has recommended a reprimanding. I don't know what that reprimanding will end up looking like. There's an announcement later on today. We can speculate, but a minister should always know what his staff are doing, especially with respect to something as large as the Greenbelt.
I think too, I follow up on that because I did see that the feds are kind of looking at it now too. Could they shut this down?
Yeah, that I don't know. I mean, the RCMP, they're doing the investigation, right?
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. So
there you go.
I really don't know what's going to come out. Sometimes with these things, there's all sorts of findings, and yet there's no repercussions. And then what's the point, right? People want to know that government is accountable. And so if all these findings occur, same with the Auditor General report was extremely well done. And, I always appreciate the work of Bonnie Lysyk, but where's the teeth? Where do we, is it a toothless tiger? We can come up with all these things and say that all these wrongs were done, but how do you right those wrongs? How do you hold those people accountable who created those wrongs? Because if you don't, many of them find it beneficial to continue creating those wrongs. They take the hit because there's no repercussions. There's no reprimanding.
It's what you said there. They take the hit. Everybody has a fall guy, it seems, anymore. This is a pretty deep subject. I mean, obviously, we're talking about rural Ontario here. It's going to affect a lot of different communities, and you touched on it. And that was my next question about Nanticoke, because this is a sidebar to the Greenbelt. But like you said, where are you going to find the infrastructure for it? Mm-hmm. The water plants that's needed, all this stuff that's going to have to go in there, and it just sort of becomes another suburb of Hamilton, if you don't mind me saying. We're kind of losing Haldimand and Norfolk in a way, because it just seems like they're splitting us up almost. Like it's making these little, I don't know, plastic towns. I don't know. I agree with you, and especially when you're looking at Nanticoke and what's gone into that land in the last 50 years, since 1970s, with the big three out there. I have a lot of concerns.
And we need to protect those jobs out there. Those are good paying jobs. And that's where those jobs should be. That's the proper location for those jobs.
Well, even at Stelco at one point was saying, wait a minute, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, all of them have said, no, we'll pack our bags. And people say to me, oh, they're just blowing smoke. No, they're not. Why would they want to work around 40,000 people when they can take their business to the US, go to an industrial park, and not have to work around 40,000 people? They're not going to work around 40,000 people. And, it's been suggested to me, oh, you're being dramatic again. 40,000 people, that's, many, many, many years down the road. Well, okay, but you can get to 15, 20,000 people pretty darn quick.
Yeah.
We've seen it in neighboring communities. So, I don't know. I'm all about preserving our way of life. And I get that growth has to be done, but it has to be done responsibly. And what we're seeing across North America right now is not responsible. I'll go back to my convention that I went to at the beginning of July in Detroit. And, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, because they're doing the exact same thing all across the US. And there are groups there sounding the alarm bells on farmland saying, look, we've got to feed our people. So if we rely on the US, if we pave over our farmland and we're relying on the US for food and they've paved over their farmland, guess what? They're going to be charging us through the nose for food that we import into Canada. So, like I say, I don't know who is behind the end game on this, but it is extremely concerning. And, I know that there's a few federal liberals, one of which is running for Ontario Liberal leadership, who might want us eating other proteins other than animals and things like that. It's really scary when you look at some of the things that most people don't know exist. Some of the legislation that has been brought forward, the ideas for legislation, it's a very scary agenda as far as I'm concerned. We're getting rid of the way of life that we know, and I'm terrified what my grandchildren are going to face.
And it's, when you were talking about that earlier too, there was a couple other things to touch base on. When you start losing that, boy, that security of your area as far as your agricultural, I mean, Norfolk, Hull and Norfolk is huge agriculture. Like we can't let that
Mm-hmm.
just slide away. It's
No.
important that we maintain that. Was there anything good out of AMO that you want to talk about? Like, let's change the beat a little bit here that you saw. I mean, obviously you guys were there, taking it all in.
So I would say to, the residents of Hull and Norfolk that, both your mayors were there, Mayor Martin, Mayor Bentley, and they had their, they had councilors with them, they had their CEOs with them, and they did a fantastic job of, taking forward the issues from each county. And, I may not always feel, like I agree with some of the asks that go forward, but I think it's very important for me to be there and support my municipal partners and, sit there kind of, in front of cabinet ministers and say, hey, you know what? I support my municipal partners. They've been elected to figure out what's best at the local level. And so it's important for me to be there and support them. And I think both of our mayors did a fantastic job of taking forward the issues and the requests from Haldeman Norfolk. So both were received very well. Both counties were received very well. Both presented very professionally. And in the delegations that I sat through, there were a lot of receptive comments between the cabinet minister and the counties. So I think it was a win for both of them. I think they did a great job. There was a delegation or a meeting that I sat in on that was, I'll just touch on it briefly, but it was kind of the fireworks for me. You may remember back in maybe February or March, I asked Indigenous Affairs Minister Greg Rickford, who was in charge at Six Nations. Is it Six Nations Elected Council, or is it the Haudenosaunee Development Institute? And he accused me of meddling, and that he had a very good working relationship with Chief Mark Hill, and that, they would be figuring this out imminently. And how dare I kind of ask the question. So there was a meeting held at AMO, and none of us really knew what it was about, but it was all of the mayors and councilors from along the Haldeman Tract. And to his credit, Chief Hill, he really went at Minister Rickford hard, saying, you know what, you guys are asking for development everywhere, and yet you won't allow us in Haldeman County and other areas to develop in certain areas because nobody knows who they're negotiating with. You need to put an end to this. And I just kind of sat there with a little, smirk on my face going, well, wait a minute. I thought I was meddling a few months ago. And here's the chief, and here's all of the mayors, the mayor of Brantford, our mayor from Haldeman County, all saying the exact same thing, tearing a strip off Minister Rickford, saying, look, you know what? You have got to determine who is in charge, because folks go, whoa, this is way too complicated. I don't know who to negotiate with, right? So there's a lot to be said for that, meaning, oh man, I've got pages and pages of notes, but it's a very hot issue in this area, and probably the most interesting meeting at AMO.
And that has to go through federal as well, right? Like that can't be just a provincial decision and a Haldeman Norfolk decision, or Haldeman and Brant decision.
It could be a decision of the Indigenous Affairs Minister, provincially.
On the provincial side.
So
okay.
I believe that the minister has the ability to say, you know what, developers and anyone doing work along the Haldeman Tract will deal only with the elected officials. Okay, I think he has the ability. In the meeting, he said there were legalities that were preventing him from doing this, but when asked what those legalities were, they weren't articulated.
There you go. What's your fall agenda going into the House? What are you looking at?
I know that the Greenbelt's going to be front and center, so I'm prepared to talk about that. In the way I'm going to talk about that is I'm going to ask the Auditor General, hey, look, you did this great report on the Greenbelt, but I ask you to keep a very close eye on what's going on at Nanticoke. And following up kind of on the AMO side, in an interesting turn of events, both of our mayors were extended strong mayor powers from Premier Ford at the beginning of AMO. And that is a very, very interesting turn of events. I can kind of hypothesize why the government may have done this, but it puts both counties in a very interesting position, and more so Haldeman County, because you have a council that has voted in favor of the ministerial zoning order for that property. Okay, and yet, in order to, I don't know how to properly explain this, but in order to accept those strong mayor powers, council has to vote for those strong mayor powers. The majority of council has to accept that Mayor Bentley would receive strong mayor powers. When you accept strong mayor powers, you have to sign a pledge that you are going to meet the provincial housing targets. That's what it's all about.
Wow.
Okay, so my suspicion is the majority of Haldeman County Council does not want Mayor Bentley to be a strong mayor because they believe that she will stop the development at Nanticoke. But by not having Mayor Bentley as a strong mayor, they're also spitting in the eye of the whole idea that they want to meet provincial housing targets. It's a double-edged sword for Haldeman County.
Wasn't that the super mayor bill? We talked about that a few months ago.
Oh, yeah, the whole one that I used to talk about. Yeah. Superpowers, here you are. You're a strong mayor. I'm going to send you your cape and your tights.
But so, yeah, they're just trying to, it seems like they're just trying to backdoor a lot of this stuff. Just avoid that the whole.
Well, I find the strong mayor thing, I find it extremely fascinating. And there were a lot of...
wasn't the original intent of that, though, for the cities?
Mm-hmm.
Like for Toronto? And
there's a reason they've done it here. There is.
Yeah, I get it now when you said it.
There is a reason. And I may know. I may
hear about it in the fall.
I know. It's not because they're... I don't know.
There's an ulterior motive. Let's just
There's an ulterior motive. Yeah.
Folks, just do your research. You'll figure it out pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get off. I want to talk, you and I told you before we started, we're going to talk about the Greenbelt a lot, but there's a couple other things let's get to, because speaking of agriculture, what's upcoming? Our fairs. And I'm sure you're going to be hanging out and having some fun, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Like the summer kind of festival circuit ends, and much of that summer circuit involves parades now too. Kudos to all these communities who put together parades during the summer, the fall, and Christmas. It's a lot of work, but our small communities are pulling that off. So yeah, I just moved right from summer circuit. Like this weekend we have Bayfest, and then the following week we go into Fall Fest in Delhi, and it won't end until Christmas, until the snow's flying and I'm freezing my butt off.
Panorama's been lit, right?
Yeah. So it's incredible. I mean, there's obviously things we look forward to. We look forward to Caledonia Fair. We look forward to the Norfolk County Fair, of course, where we get to catch up with folks that we may not have seen in a year, and always a good time. We're so fortunate in this area to have all of these things. And I say this repeatedly when I speak at events is, I talk to other MPPs, and in their area, they may go to a one-day event or a half-a-day event. But here in Haldeman, Norfolk, we string together multiple-day events. Our volunteers don't do a half-a-day event. They don't do a one-day event. They do like a 4 or 5, 2-3 day event. That is remarkable. Right? Mm-hmm. The amount of work that goes into that, the amount of volunteer power that goes into that is just astounding. And we're so blessed here. Like, we don't have to leave the area in order to have fun. And anyone who says that they're bored in Haldeman, Norfolk, it's truly, clearly their own fault.
Last thing, and I want to touch base because this hits home for me too. I saw recently that you were in Port Dover at the rink with Terry Cargis, and now I go way back because obviously I'm a Dover boy, but I remember Terry's dad, Jack, and how the effect he had on growing hockey in Port Dover and just how important it is. And Terry's like an encyclopedia of Dover hockey. If you ever want to know who played on what team in what era, he's got that information. But talk a little bit about that. And you mentioned volunteers, and just we're lucky, we're blessed in Halton
Yeah.
Norfolk because all the great hockey teams, all the great volunteers, baseball, we got it all. We really do.
Mhm.
And
You
these,
know, so the event for Terry was yesterday, and it just had all the right feels. It was interesting because I walk in, I walk across the parking lot to the front of the arena, and there's a whole lot of testosterone there. Let me tell you, there was maybe three females, and the rest was all males. And I don't know how I got the invite, but I just feel so lucky when I get invited to something like that because I'm so passionate about the game of hockey. Number
yes,
one. Secondly, volunteerism. And thirdly, one of the things that they talked about that Terry did is so I know I can't articulate it, but during COVID, it was such a dark time for so many people. You couldn't leave your home, you weren't supposed to do this, that, or the other. And apparently Terry was one of these guys who said, you know what, we're going to make this happen. We're going to make sure, Johnny and Dave and all these other guys can leave their house, leave their wife who wants them to leave the house, or just get that hour of sanity out on the ice. And a lot of people threw in the towel during that time. I mean, I sat around on volunteer groups who said, this just isn't worth it. Of course it's worth it. Of course it is, because this is a group of older folks. Much of my work was with younger, like kids, youth. And it was worth it for everyone. It was just as hard on adults as for some adults who were retired and didn't have work to go to at their computer every day. And they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs, can't even go to a car wash. It was just as hard on those folks. And then, of course, the camaraderie that folks like Jack and Terry have created. I mean, what happens in that arena? What happens in those change rooms? I'm still a change room girl. I mean, when I go play my old lady hockey, I call it, on Sunday nights, man, I got to get some of those ladies to sign waivers that they cannot go out in the community and talk about some of the things I talk about in the change room. But, it's just got all the feels, the things that we actually get from being part of a group like that and going out there and kicking the puck around for an hour or two a week, giving people that ability and making sure that continues year after year. Man, that was such a great event. And I said to Terry, I said, I'm so happy that someone like you, a soft-spoken guy like Terry, who would never ever want the attention, right? He just does it because he feels it's the right thing to do. And here he is being recognized, by this part of the community that really, really values what he's done. And it's just a beautiful thing, Dave.
it is. And the rink's home to so many of us, right? And
Yeah.
it's great when you see those folks recognized for what they do. It's a great way
Mm-hmm.
to finish today's show because that's, we were talking down and dirty, and I don't want to know about your potty mouth in the change room, by the way, young lady. So let's keep that cleaned up. Thanks for doing this. You stay out of trouble. We're going to talk next month again.
You bet. I look forward to it.